let me start by giving you a little bit of a taste of what we're going to be looking at today, but taking a moment to make sure the music has time to fade out and say, hey, why don't you hit that subscribe button if you want? But I guess you're going to decide that later in the video if you haven't already. I've not even given you jack stuff yet. You can't swear this early. And the funny thing is, some of the stuff I most want to talk about, the way YouTube works, basically we can't talk about it till later in the video. But the actual topics I'm eager to get to as we respond to this lovely person, Janellieeelliee. I don't know how you say it. Jane. Oh, it's janellieeelliee, I think. I don't know. Whatever. Jane, can I call you the things I really want to respond to, we're gonna have to wait till later in the video because it's a sensitive topic on YouTube. I said I'd give you that taste. Let me give you that taste. Here's that taste. That's the wrong window.
There are so many scriptures in the Bible that talk about what a submissive wife actually is.
So just so we know where we're starting, I'm going to be showing you the infection, really, on TikTok of the soft approach to purity culture and violating the autonomy of women. If this sort of gets at what we're talking about here, right? You kind of get what I'm saying here? You understand what things, when I say autonomy, I want to talk about later? That's where we're going. Real quick, before we get started, I do have a quick one of these important messages. Hey, it's that spooky time of year, but if you are running your devices without a VPN, then you should be much more afraid than the rest of us. I feel like, I could put a sound effect in. Here we go. That's how that works. Let me tell you about the VPN that I use. The company is called Private Internet Access. There are many people, companies, and groups who want your data. Some to simply influence your shopping habits, some to influence your opinions, and others for much more nefarious reasons. But you don't have to give them your data. You can do something about it. Specifically, you can and you should get a VPN, aka a virtual private network. Private Internet Access, my VPN of choice, hides your IP address and it encrypts your internet connection. This way, your data is safe from the prying eyes of your internet service provider, network administrators, and, becoming more and more important, government censors. Plus, Private Internet Access gives you the option to block ads, trackers, and malicious websites so you can feel both private and safe online. And as something extra, the World Cup is about to start in November on the 20th, and in the US, all games will be available only to those who pay for a subscription. But with PIA VPN, you can legally watch it for free by connecting to the UK streaming servers and watching it on BBC iPlayer or ITV Player. With Private Internet Access, you get a fast, secure, and reliable VPN connection anytime, anywhere, and with one subscription, you get all of that on 10 devices at once. Now, the best part is the deal that Private Internet Access is offering our audience. So sign up below with my link and you're gonna get 82% off plus 3 free months, meaning that you're gonna have all of that security, everything we just talked about, for $2.11 a month. And since Private Internet Access comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support, it's all risk-free for you. Click the link below, and remember, it's an awesome way to support this channel by supporting our sponsor, Private Internet Access. All right, back to you, me. That's right. Now you're back to me and you're back to Jane. Here we go. Okay, let's just watch. I have to be really careful with this because we're on YouTube, not the wild west of TikTok where music can just be whatever. So don't be surprised if I sing along or something to throw off the content ID. Let's hear what she says a submissive wife is as we build up to what I really want to talk about, her terrible okay. I don't hate Jane, by the way. Jane seems nice. She seems like a nice person. Let me extend an invite. Jane, you do a lot of sketches debunking things where you play both the person, the debunker, and the person you're debunking. I don't know if you're familiar with what a straw man is, but it's exclusively what you do. You only present the version of the argument you think you're ready to engage and can slam dunk on, and never represent any sort of nuanced side. And we're going to talk about that. I'll respond to some of your debunks, but if you would like to, we can have a perfectly pleasant conversation. Come on, let's talk. Let's talk. You to me, Jane. I'd be happy to have that conversation. What is a submissive wife, Jane?
A submissive wife is a helpmate to the husband. That means we do things sometimes we don't like doing.
The copyright music thing, that means, so a submissive husband, and you should see, there's this whole thing about why women get what's another phrase for get the shaft? The imagery is bad here. Get the sore end of the deal, the bad end of the stick. I'll go back to that one after this one.
It means we don't make decisions without them.
I mean, that's just a good policy in relationships as far as big decisions. You don't need to consult me on many things. Anything you spend the money that is exclusively yours if we were married. I believe in the way you would work it is with a person that you're married to, or if you're polyamorous, like a nesting partner, like a joint bank account for bills. And then everybody has also their own money, but maybe a joint savings account too. One of those Anyway, that's just a good policy. That's a big decision. That's now, I think maybe she's going to address it. We're not addressing the fact that his no can override her yes. That is the actual trad wife garbage out of this. Not to say that in practice it actually ends up happening a lot. But they like to cosplay trad wives.
And sometimes it even means agreeing with something we don't always like.
So there we go. That's sort of indicating that override there. I'm going to have to sing along with this. Now we're getting to lyrics.
Such as moving to another state for the sake of their job. Unfortunately, today's world has misconstrued what a submissive wife is.
Look, I don't think this is such a soft example of of course people don't enjoy moving if they don't want to move. But most couples are going to tell you, if you have a situation where your agreement is you take care of the house and the kids, I work and provide the money, and that's our partnership. And as long as that's an informed choice, even radical atheists like myself are fine with it. If you want to be a trad wife, be a trad wife. Now, you believe you've been called to. Clearly, there's deep indoctrination from what I've seen so far. So I don't actually know that you would have the ability to know if you're an adult. And so I'm not going to infantilize you and say you're too childish or too stupid, but I know the power of indoctrination. And while I will respect whatever you say was your choice and treat you as though, of course I'm going to be skeptical, because I've known so many adults in your exact position who it isn't until they actually find freedom from their oppressive religion that they recognize they didn't really have a chance.
They think of it more as a doormat. However, a truly biblical marriage is about the wife submitting to the husband and the husband submitting to Christ.
Yeah. So basically, here's the problem. The wife submits to the husband to Christ. But what is actually Christ? The husband's intuition, the things the husband feels very passionate about, because the whole teaching is that the husband is the conduit to God. So ultimately, the wife will be treated as more of an equal, even though literally the equation you just presented.
So ultimately, the wife will be treated as more of an equal.
The equation you just presented doesn't make that possible.
Today's society is all about
I'm just going to mute
relationships.
Because I could just read it. Today is all about self-centered relationships, telling what each of us do for one another and expecting something in return, which is not true, but a conditional love. What a way to just put... Obviously, there are very selfish relationships out there that are about aggrandizing one person, and there are people who are assholes about it. But the idea that a relationship should be only sacrifice, that you're sitting there going if you don't expect something in return, really, you don't expect anything in return from your marriage? You don't expect in your sort of trad marriage to feel protected, provided for, and he doesn't expect things out of your arrangement? The arrangement, the expectations, it's going to be, I need this, you can give that. And now look, everybody should have their own boundaries and to set it up. I'm not here to tell you that most relationships are healthy. Most aren't. Most relationships are not healthy. I'm not going to give my evaluation of yours or not. I simply don't know enough. Obviously, I have some inclinations because I think that there are some foundational things which you project which are inherently unhealthy, but I'm not going to jump to anything to say that overall that means your children are doomed. Overall, whatever. I don't know you well enough or the dynamic to basically diagnose anything. And the concept of unconditional love is almost entirely a myth anyway. I can see the possibility that you can have close to it more likely for your offspring because so often people altruistically sacrifice, but there may still even be a limit there. Unconditional love. And let me tell you, people who come from fundamentalist religion, not unlike what I see out of your channel, who challenge their parents or their loved ones if they want to leave, boy, will you notice that unconditional love changes, even as they will weaponize that they love you, still use the term love as they're telling you how much they hate certain things about you. It's funny how much like prayer working versus not working looks exactly the same as random chants working or not working. It's funny how certain types of hate look exactly like Christian love. But let's move on. I told you I would show you. I think I can find it easily. Let me go look. So this is in the style that she does of the skits where she's talking to a version of her. She's really good at defeating herself, playing a person who is opposed to. Now this one won't be terribly confrontational, but here we go.
Why did God choose men to be the head of the home? Because unfortunately, the woman, Eve, was the one that was deceived in the garden.
Already such an absurd, no. Adam as the man, Eve was created from his rib prior to all of this. Eve is literally just like a portion, a small percentage of him, clearly from prior to the apple eating. They were already setting up using pronouns that were masculine for God, using pronouns that were masculine for Adam, even though before the fall, gender and that concept would have been completely meaningless. And also, again, Adam is first, and Adam is the image of God, and Eve is the image of Adam. Do you really expect me and anyone else, Jane, to believe that you think the roles would be reversed, that women would have the spiritual roles of men, and that men would have the spiritual roles of women and be birth givers and all of that, which would have meant a major change to what you consider the two true genders, because I've seen your gender stuff there too. It's in there. It's all rolled in there. You really think all of that would have swapped if Adam had simply eaten the apple first and brought it to Eve? And by the way, the chronology on this is just stupid because Eve is basically punished. That's what it comes down to, isn't the head, because the snake, or whichever version of the bullshit story, that's, by the way, also obviously very untrue, but this person fancies herself as using scientific facts to fight, I think I can say the word now, abortion arguments, and yet seems to literally believe in the biblical story of the fall of Adam, which even tremendous religious institutions like the Catholic Church admit is entirely a story because it can't be true. But this super scientific person, who the snake chose first, that's the person who decide. Clearly, that's who shouldn't be the head.
Yeah, but Adam ate the fruit too.
This is great.
But who gave Adam the fruit?
It's not just saying like why, because she went first, but then he did too. It's literally, she has internalized the hatred of women that is ingrained in Christianity, because this is demonizing. Well, Satan got Eve, but then Eve took on the role of Satan. Eve is who caused the sin of Adam. I would be happy, Jane. Dear Mr. Atheist at gmail.com. Let's have the conversation. Let's have the real conversation. Because when you do this kind of stuff, it projects a level of confidence that I don't believe you actually have, but I will platform you. I will share my platform with you if you do, because the type of confidence you have makes it suggest you think you could win these discussions or arguments or debates, whatever you want to call them, if you were actually having these conversations, even as you make the opposition so comical.
Well, Eve did. Exactly. The woman led the man into sin. So God used that opportunity to correct the dynamic of the relationship between a husband and wife so it doesn't happen again.
The woman led the man into sin, which they're, of course, incapable of doing now. The women couldn't ever convince a man now to do something as sinful as eating a goddamn piece of fruit. Oh, mind blown. She convinced him to eat fruit prior to the gift of knowledge, prior to being able to even assess what is sinful. They don't have any of this in this magic tale. They don't have any of this. And she does. She convinced him to eat which, by the way, just goes on to show you that God just makes up arbitrary, stupid rules for the sake of it. There's no wisdom to don't eat the fruit of the tree of wisdom, of knowledge. There's no wisdom to that. It's just I'm setting a rule down. This is what's up. This is the rule. What are you going to do about it? I'm God, the biggest bully that ever didn't exist, because that is sort of the problem there. I'm happy to talk to you about that as well, Jane. I promise to be respectful. I get a little amped up if you start just lying or you ignore and just try to like gish gallop. There are things you can do that brings out, but we can have a perfectly respectful conversation. Respect my time. I'll respect your time. And it can be nice. Jane, I would love it. Come on. God, I keep forgetting to reach out to Mises. I'm supposed to do something with Mises. God damn it. For like a year now, I think. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, but even today, some men still lead women into sin.
That's true.
You're right. And that's why ultimately we are to submit to God and not to man.
Except for in marriage. Oh, she's going to say that.
When the marriage is right and biblical, you forget the labels because the husband loves the wife as Christ loved the church. And the wife respects and supports her husband, and it's a beautiful thing.
You got to love the contradictory nature of, I feel like this is like one of those memes where it's like, she's saying this now, and then you could just reply with her other video, this you, because first of all, it starts with, you do submit to the husband, right? You absolutely do. And so now it's saying, but if the husband's wrong, what, you submit to God instead? So that's not submission. You don't know how these terms work. And in fact, you'll find Tradwife extraordinaires like the transformed wife, except in the most extreme, and I mean most, because she still believes in lots of extremes. In the most extreme places, the woman is meant to submit to the man, even if he is wrong, except for super extreme. All right, here's what I want to jump into, and we've already used up quite a bit of time on this. I want to talk about her skits, wherein she is debunking, she's providing her, and it's funny, she's so confident in them, she talks about wanting to even have a website. And I just want to show you some of these deals. So, this is the video, and it's put in a very strange way. It's put in the way of making an atheist, which she is not, pro-life, which she is, win an argument against a progressive Christian, so somebody like God is gray, even as the progressive Christian. This is, again, the straw man. She's trying to present, there are idiots out there that do this thing, like Mike Winger. I'm going to present a secular argument for why it's wrong to be gay and the like. And they're always tremendously flawed, these arguments. I mean, hard to imagine them worse. So here's her playing the pro-life atheist who apparently says,
life begins at conception.
Right. And by the way, stick around because you might react to this poorly. This is a mostly correct statement. Kind of. Stick around. I will explain. But I am not a pro-life atheist. I am a pro-choice atheist. Absolutely. Despite the fact that I mostly agree with this statement with some exceptions. But
Life begins at birth.
That is an obviously stupid statement. That is wrong. Continuing on.
How do you figure? Because that's when the fetus is no longer attached to the mother and is their own person.
Which is not the definition of life. So again, stupid. Don't worry, I'm going to address this all because there will be some people. There are lots of people who are pro-life for bad reasons. There are people who are pro-choice for, who are unable to defend it. There's not a lot of bad reasons to be pro-choice. You know, for some people, it is just as simple as understanding the basic concept of autonomy. You can't force somebody to be pregnant. Nobody has the right to parasitically leech off another person to stay alive. And that's a fine enough reason to begin, but isn't necessarily capable of debunking the straw man, the rewordings here that are happening. And I will do so here at the end.
Actually, this is the definition of life.
By the way, that doesn't matter at all. Giving a Webster's dictionary or a dictionary.com, the definition of life basically saying, the capacity for growth, reproduction, functional activity, and continual changes preceding death. Not remotely important when we are talking about the right to live. And we'll explain that very shortly too.
This is the definition of life. And the definition of life clearly agrees that it begins at conception.
It's really funny because this is the definition of life and the definition of life and switches to another one, which is funny. But still mostly a true statement. Life begins at conception. You could say to some degree. I'll explain in a minute. We'll get there.
Not to mention that the baby is a person before they're born because no woman is born with two sets of different DNA.
Well, every person is a combination of two sets of different DNA. But I think I get what she was trying to say.
Okay, well, speaking from a religious standpoint, even the Bible says that life begins at first breath. I'm not really religious, but I do know the Bible, and it says this.
Yeah, so the Bible isn't true, so none of this part should matter at all, especially if you're trying to make a secular argument.
Let's not forget the story of Zachariah and Elizabeth.
Which is, by the way, why I don't spend a lot of time on it, only to point out the potential hypocrisy where people say the only reference to abortion in the Bible seems to be instructions on how to perform it. Let me see if, I'm trying to remember if she gets to anything else good.
Well, the Bible talks about how we were born with the intent to experience free will, which a fetus cannot do because they don't have the consciousness to do so. Actually, consciousness begins before birth.
That's also true, by the way. To some degree, it is. You know, there's actually, one could make an argument as far as what we associate with human consciousness, that may not even be present in like 6-month-old babies, but that would certainly not be an argument for terminating a 6-month-old person. But we'll get there. Again, we'll get there. Please, I know I'm giving a lot of...
But to be able to make life-altering decisions because of free will, neither a fetus nor a newborn baby could do that. So why is it okay to kill one and not the other? Life begins at...
All right, so let's get into it. Life begins at conception. I told you this is a mostly true statement. Now, actually, you could argue that life precedes that. By biological terms, by as far as if we're wanting to get into the technical, and she's wanting to jump into the definitions, a spermatozoa and an ovum are both independently what we would consider alive. They aren't like in that category of something like viruses, for example. Viruses aren't alive, kind of. But then some people go, well, but they kind of are, but they kind of aren't. There's a big argument about whether you could consider a virus truly alive. And then certain viruses seem much more alive than other. But as far as the way we define life, and certainly it doesn't seem that viruses could exist if life didn't exist. So it's an argument. Bacteria, however, clearly alive. Spermatozoa, sperm, and ovums, eggs, both alive independently. Now, I understand that when we're saying when life begins, we're talking about the potential life of a completed DNA sequence, not half and half. And so that's where I say mostly true, if you want to get almost somewhat philosophical and metaphorical about it. However, you have to acknowledge that that is what you're doing, but they won't, because that sort of screws them over when we talk about when somebody is considered medically alive. So when we're going to talk about abortion, we're going to talk about starting with the state a thing is in prior to its brain kicking on. This thing that happens debatably around 20 to 25 weeks, that the brain is on, and she mentioned consciousness at the end. That same state it is in prior to that 20 to 25 weeks is the state that we consider a human medically dead at any age. That is the moment we pull the plug. If it seems unlikely or impossible, and in much more cases it's impossible, that they could recover from that state, that the brain could kick back on, that some sort of function could heal this, you are considered medically dead, and that's where we as a society generally all medically agree that there's nothing medically unethical about ending the life of that person. And if you want to get, again, further philosophical and talk about it, what you're really describing when we're talking about an abortion of that kind, prior to that 20 to 25 week range, what you're really talking about is, do we have a duty to see to it that experience and consciousness begin, as in perceived experience, not reactive, not that you can hit something and have a nerve reaction, actual, the brain is on and has some level of understanding, sensory input, understanding that something just happened, even at the level a baby does, a very primitive brain does. Even, I'll give you, at the level a shrimp would, because it's not even at that point. Is there a duty to make sure that that eventually happens, that turns on? And it seems to me the obvious answer is no. You can't kill something that's never experienced a moment of the sensation, the human sensation of life, for being technically alive. Now, obviously, abortion goes beyond that. And there are abortions that go later into term. They are extremely rare, and rarer still are any that you could consider remotely arbitrary. Most people are going to get abortions prior to that 20 to 25 weeks. In fact, they're going to get them prior to 10 weeks because the process by which, it might be 8, where you can still use the pills, but the process, no matter where you are, the earlier, the easier it is on you. It's still a medical procedure. It still does stuff to you. And so the earlier, the better. The late term ones that these people often like to further strawman, as though they are representative of something people want to do, because in almost every single case, this is basically a tragedy that a mother is having to evaluate. Because this is when we're talking about a 30-week-old, 35, whatever you like, when we're talking about that late, this is a fetus, if you will. At that point, most people don't mind calling it a child because it's going to have a name. It's going to have a room in the house. This is not when arbitrary abortions are happening. Sure, I'm sure you can go and find that one example of a person who was probably a murderous asshole who did it arbitrarily, and we actually would cast very negative judgment. And these are going to be the rare exceptions. And rightly so, when they've pointed to certain doctors in the past, those doctors have ended up in prison. But when it comes to that far along, those are extreme rares. These are abortions happening that late along, after that sensation of consciousness happens. After that, we're talking about aborting named children who have a home. We're waiting for them because something has gone wrong. One of the common ones being a ill development or non-development of kidneys. And by common, I mean amongst that group. The whole thing is rare. And so the blood isn't getting filtered. Things get backed up, starts filling up the lungs. And if you give birth to a live baby, it will only live long enough to suffer and drown in front of you and die. And by the way, that type of abortion generally still requires birthing the child in some way, whether it seems closer to the more traditional way or C-section. So the pretend that these are arbitrarily happening because somebody doesn't want to give birth, for example, at that late, you're still giving birth. But your argument about when it is alive doesn't matter. Again, your moment of life is actually mostly philosophical, but I mostly agree with it. Beginning at conception, That is the moment your zygote, then embryo, then fetus is beginning cell division for the completed project. If we had a good DNA reader within a very short amount of time, if we had the machine that could take my DNA and show you a picture of me, right? Like it could generate it based on all of that and tell you all these aspects about me, we at that moment could get a pretty good accurate representation of what that person was going to look like and be like at 1, 2, 20, 30, 40, whatever. We don't have that technology yet, but if we did, certainly that would be the moment. Being alive is not the threshold. If you're talking about whether or not, and by the way, at the top of it all is autonomy. Nobody has the right to force someone else to use their organs to keep them alive. But a pro-choice person like me can still understand that other pro-choice people would go, on my end personally, it would be imperative that we do this before consciousness is achieved. And once it is achieved, we wouldn't consider it until after. But as far as the autonomy thing goes, that is just the rule. And it's nobody else's business besides the doctor and the person. And the whole pro-choice movement is, it's a fucking medical decision. Stay the fuck out of it. That's the position. And this weird straw man thing, because anybody who actually is capable of debating this, and you know very well that the average person isn't, because you know very well that the average person on your side isn't capable of it. And I dare say, I don't know that you are. And that's why I want to invite you on and give you the chance to make the case. Debunk an actual person making the actual arguments. That's what I'd love to see, Jane. I'd love to. I would love that. Because I can agree with this statement that life begins at conception and still tell you that you are wrong. And still tell you that your representation of the argument is lazy. Because this content isn't actually made to change the people's minds who are actually engaging with the information. It's important when you make videos like these that you also represent the other side, because if you have a competent representation of the other side, it doesn't go so well and it doesn't go so easily. So let's talk. Let's talk. You aren't a pro-life atheist, so it was already the whole thing. You're not a progressive Christian or a pro-life atheist. So it was just, sort of silly to me. Do support the sponsor. You need a VPN, get private internet access, do it at the link down below. It's awesome. It's what I use. I really do recommend it. It's a product I genuinely believe in, and I wouldn't bring you a product I didn't. That's it for me. Sponsor link down below. It was great seeing you. Really was. I'm glad to be back. Expect a ton more content from here and potentially another video reviewing some of these here TikToks, but certainly lots more TikTok reviews. Follow me on YouTube. Now decide if you're going to hit that button. Love you. Fade to black.